First Samuel, if I were you, I would turn there. Chapter 17, we have a lot of Bible today. We're going to be looking at a rather lengthy account. We're going to be breaking it down a piece at a time. Let me just say that today I want to offer a standalone sermon based on a beloved account. It's one that is almost universally known. If I were to go into the street and ask 100 people if they heard of the story of David versus Goliath, they would likely say yes. They wouldn't be able to recite all of it per se, but they'd at least have heard about it at least once in their lives. And there are many filters through which we can consider the story of David versus Goliath in 1 Samuel 17, but this morning I want to consider it through a very particular lens or filter. And what I mean by that is I want to look at this account through the filter of facing and overcoming opposition. Facing and overcoming opposition, obstacles, adversity, and more. How many of you realize that in the course of life and living, it's not always going to be unicorns and rainbows? There will be challenges ahead of you. You've already been through a number if you've been alive for longer than 15 minutes. And there will be challengers, whether it be a human adversary or spiritual ones. We have to learn as Christians to face, to contend with, and to ultimately overcome opposition and obstacle. And I would put forth that David in 1 Samuel 17 gives a master class on the topic of how to do it and how to do it well. And this morning, it's my joy to share probably 5 to 6 points that I want to present to you. We're going to keep it at a macro level, looking kind of big picture, because for each of us, the way in which we apply it to the obstacles that we're facing, it's going to vary. Kathy's challenges are not mine, and they're not Rick's. And what Bobby is going through may not be what I'm facing, but the principles I want to share this morning, they are universally applicable. So whether it's in the home, in a marriage, in your finances, in some vice that you struggle with, some addictive tendency, and more, I want to give you a series of things. I want to invest in you so that you can overcome. How many of you realize that you are not called to be conquered? You are called to be more than a conqueror. So whatever you're going through, can we give the Lord the best 25 to 30 minutes of our attention? Because as I'm speaking to you, spoiler alert, I'm speaking to me as well. Let's talk about point number 1. Are you ready? My note takers, my dear note takers, all 10 or so of you, I want to talk about the idea of perceiving a problem. In other words, if you are going to effectively overcome and endure an enemy or an obstacle, you first have to identify and perceive the thing. Many people live with problems. They live with challenges. They live with challengers, and they don't even know that they have them. They think it's normal to occupy the space that they do when someone from the outside might say, why are you putting up with A, B, C, or X, Y, Z? So if you're going to face and overcome problems, you have to be willing to first identify them. And if you say, I have no problems, can we hang out a little bit? I'll share. I raised the question that I'm going to quickly answer. What was the problem that Israel in this case and David specifically faced? Let's go to verse 1 of 1 Samuel 17. Are you there? Now the Philistines, everyone say the Philistines. They were an adversarial neighbor. They were always at odds with the people of faith. The Philistines gathered their forces. Why? For war. You see, we're going to be entering into a text that's foreign to us because it's not often that our neighbor has arrayed itself against us for the purpose of war. Yet spiritually, we do live in the midst of one. They had assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Damim between Soko and Azekah. Look it up in your own time as to where it is. Neither here nor there for now. Now Saul, who was the king, and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle line to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another with a valley between them. Can you kind of see it in your mind? A valley with two opposing hills. One is covered in Philistines and their camp. One is covered with Saul, the armies of Israel, and more. Now in verse 4, the plot thickens. A champion named what? Who's heard of Goliath before? Who is from Gath, came out from the Philistine camp. Now, the NIV says this. I'm looking for some English translation here. His height was 6 cubits and a span. Does anybody have a study Bible that says roughly how big that is? 9 feet 9 inches. Now, before you say that couldn't happen, I'm just going to stick with the word. You do you. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. That is 125 pounds. His armor weighed more than some of you weigh. I came out of the womb 130 pounds, so I wouldn't know. Now on his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point, the point of the thing alone weighed 600 shekels, that's 15 pounds. And the shield bearer went ahead of him. How many want to pick a fight with Goliath? How many would look at him and say, you know what, I got this? Now Goliath stood and he shouted to the ranks of Israel. Again, there's two opposing camps, and he would come out, and he begins to speak to the opposing army. Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. And if he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. If I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us. In other words, he's willing to strike a bargain. I'm willing to man up for my team. Is anyone at all over there willing to come and take me on? Whoever wins, winner wins all. No pressure. Because the stakes aren't just death for the fighter, but it's also subjugation for the losing army. And then the Philistines said, and I want you to look at this in verse 10, this day I defy the armies of Israel. This was a bold man, a brazen man, and I would say one who had in many ways earned his sense of confidence, because I'm willing to bet this was not Goliath's first time at a battle. You don't go into battle with a spear that size and armor that heavy, that size, and say, you know what, this is my first time, I'm going to volunteer for this. No, this was a man with some experience. Give me a man and let us fight each other. Now skip down to verse 16. For 40 days. How many days? 40. The champion Goliath would come. And he wouldn't just come once a day. That's bad enough. He would come every morning and every evening, and he would take his stand. Seems like a big problem that the army is facing, and we're going to talk about their response in a moment. But what we see in verse 21, 22, and 23, that David begins to pick up specifically on the problem that is Goliath. Now, Israel and the Philistines, verse 21, were drawing up their lines, facing each other. David left his things, we'll talk about this in a moment, with the keeper of the supplies. You see, David wasn't there to fight. All eyes this way. David did not go to the battle to fight the battle. He came to bring some provisions for his brothers, 3 of them, who happened to be fighting the battle. He was just there bringing bread and some food. And he walks into this thing, and he begins to see and perceive what's going on. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies, and he ran to the battle lines, and he asked his brothers how they were. Oh, they're doing great. Things are going swimmingly. Thank you, David, for asking. And as he was talking with them, Goliath the Philistine, the champion of Gath, or from Gath, stepped out from his lines, shouted his usual defiance, and David, it says he heard it. David is now aware. He begins to perceive what so many of others have already perceived. There's a champion named Goliath, and he's a real problem. But this leads me to point number 2. Not only did David rightly identify a problem, but this is the key. He wasn't willing to live with it. David, unlike the rest of the army, including Saul himself, refused to simply live with the problem. There's something singular about David here, in that he is not willing to put up with something that so many other people seemingly are. Go back to verse 16. For 40 days, we just read this, the Philistine would come forward how often? Every morning and evening. Now, my math isn't great, but 40 times 2 is roughly what? 80 times. The army of Israel had heard this. They had heard the challenge. They had heard the mockery of the Lord and his armies spoken with condescension. I asked the question, how long were they willing to put up with it? Would another 40 days times 2 be enough to finally bring one of them to the place of action? I don't know. What I do know is that they were willing to live with it because they were afraid. Fear is a paralyzing agent. It will cripple you. Their eyes were so focused on the situation and the problem, which they had rightly perceived, that it led them to a place of utter inaction when action was entirely possible. It says in verse 11 that when the people heard the words of Goliath, they were dismayed and they were terrified. In verse 24, it says, whenever they saw the man, whenever Goliath would come out and rear his ugly face and begin to mock the people, they all fled from him in a great fear. But there's something different about David. David has heard word that the champion of Israel, who kills the champion of the Philistines, Goliath, there's certain reward and blessing and benefit that will be conferred upon him. And this is what David says in verse 31, after he begins to now encounter King Saul, who also is afraid. Verse 32, actually, David said to Saul, don't lose heart. Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. I'll go fight him. Now, you need to hear this point clearly, because if you're going to face and overcome any problem in your life, these two things have to happen without fail. Number one, you have to be willing to recognize the problem. All eyes this way. Some of you are too happy to bury your head in the sand and say there is no problem. And every morning and every evening, the problem shows up to remind you who's really in charge, and you keep your head buried. Because it's easier to deny, it's easier to let a problem fester than actually step up and deal with it. Pastor, I got an addiction, but I don't want to do anything about it. My marriage is falling apart, but I'm just going to put on the happy face and make it all work. I'm going to deny that there's even an issue and hope it goes away. Gang, can I tell you, in all of my years, and there's not many, but 47, 48, 20 plus pastoring and more, almost 30 of being a believer, I have never once in the course of my journey see a problem fix itself. Ever. If there is a problem, you have to be willing to recognize it, and you have to be willing to face it. Some of us are so comfortable with dysfunction, we can't imagine anything else. It's the environment in which we live. There's always been drama. There's always been brokenness. There's always been a Goliath. I invite him in for breakfast and dinner because he's there every morning and every evening. We laugh and we snicker, but we know it to be true. I want you to consider your life. What are the Goliaths that you've been dealing with forever because you refuse to deal with them? In some vain hope that maybe the Lord will just do it for you. Can I wreck your theology a little bit? The Lord didn't come down to fight Goliath. He worked through a champion who was willing to. Some of us have a theology where we stood on the couch and God does all the work. It doesn't work that way. There has to be someone to say, Lord, here I am, send me. I'm willing to take a stand in faith, and I'm willing to go forward. When so many others aren't. How many of you know that Jesus promised to those who are willing to receive and walk it out, not only life, but life to the full, life abundantly? then why does it seem so rare that people actually walk in that? Because it takes effort, and it takes being deliberate, and it takes being proactive. It takes a willingness to let God, the Lord, strip away the things that would hold you back and take a step of faith. Point number 3, this is a significant one. Not only did David perceive a problem and refuse to live with it, he was very careful to tune out what I will call dissuading voices. You see, no one else really thought that David could do it. It's funny because if you pick up the story in verse 12 and you read all the way through verse 29 or 30 or so, it details an interaction that David had with his brothers. Now, I just told you that David had several brothers who were part of the armies of Israel. How many brothers of David were in the battle? 3. David was the youngest. He wasn't ready for the battle. His father didn't think that he could do it. You know what, David? I have a task for you, and it's not to go fight. I want you to bring some supplies to make sure that your brothers are well fed. And you know what? I'll throw a little extra in for the commanders of the unit. Bring them some bread, bring them some cheese, whatever else he's got. I don't know. I didn't fully memorize all the details of the laundry or grocery list. But David, when he gets there, he begins to perceive Goliath, and he begins to say, what's to be done for the man that's willing to deal with that? Because David had a sense of righteous anger that wasn't willing to just put up with it. Now look at verse 28. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, familially speaking from a position of authority, because the oldest brother had rank and status within the family. Look at what he says. When he heard him speaking with the men, Eliab burned with anger at him and asked, David, why are you here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? In other words, son, you're out of your depth. You don't belong here. It's our task to fight. It's your task to watch the sheep. Thanks for the food, but beat it. I know how conceited you are. Gang, you got to hear what his brother's telling him. I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. Let me mess with you, all eyes this way. What was the Lord's assessment of David? That he was a man after what? Which speaks what? To David's heart. That it was inclined unto the things of the Lord. What's his own brother's assessment? That his heart is a wicked heart, given to conceit. You came down only to watch the battle. The older brother absolutely misreads David, mischaracterizes him, and seeks to dissuade him, to hinder him, to stop him, not because he's really concerned about David, but because he's concerned about his own reputation and image. And who does David think that he is? Be careful the voices that you entertain. And some of the worst voices, I hate to tell you this, they're going to come from your own family. David just says, well, what have I done? Can't I even speak? He doesn't waste too much time because he quickly shifts and he goes to meet Saul, who is the king. Now, verse 32, David is encountering Saul, mighty king of Israel, who's cowering. We've read this already. Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine, Saul. Your servant will go and fight him. To which Saul replied, no, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man. He's been a warrior from his youth. David's brothers try to dissuade him. And now the king says, son, you don't have it in you. This isn't going to work. There is a problem, and you're unwilling to deal with it, but you don't have what it takes to really overcome. This speaks to me because in your life, you're going to have to choose the voices that you entertain. Because you're always going to have people in your life that are going to say, you can't have that. You can't do that. You're never going to make it. You're never going to overcome. Who do you think you are? This is just a manifestation of your own pride and conceit to think that you can live life and life to the full. Do you think you deserve that? They might come from within your family, they might come from without. But there are always going to be people that tell you what can't be done until you go forth and actually do the thing. Let me ask you a question. Has anyone ever met a person named David? I'm looking at one right now. There's at least one in the audience, David Dahlstrom. How many have met someone named David before? Raise a hand. Okay, hands down. Has anyone ever met an Eliab? Not a single one. Because nobody remembers the naysayers. They remember those who are willing to go forth in the Lord and watch what can be done. Your marriage is failing. Be careful about hanging out with people whose marriages have already failed. Because part of them is going to actively root for your failure. You're battling something, you need voices that are going to rally around you to say, this can be done. All things are possible with the Lord. With him, nothing is impossible. That will direct you in a Godward direction. I have to move on. Point number 4. I love that David relied upon and looked to past victory and accumulated experience. Go with me to verse 32. We've read this 3 times now. We'll read it a 4th. David said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of the Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. To which Saul replied, I don't think so. You're not able to do this, etc., so forth and so on. But look at verse 34. David tunes out his negative voice, and now he begins to speak about something specifically. David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, when what turned on him? Lions and bears. Look at this. I seized it by its hair, I struck it, and I killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear, and this Philistine will be like one of them. Why? Because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord, verse 37, who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. You see, in the midst of the present crisis, an obstacle, David, unlike the rest of the army, including Saul, wasn't focusing just on the obstacle. He had identified it, he was aware of it, but his heart and his mind were also in other places. And a real part of him is looking back upon past victories. And he's assuring himself and reinforcing the truth that if God has empowered me to succeed and find victory in seasons past, why not now and why not again? That's incredible to me. Look over the course of your life. Do you have any victories, any moments that you can look back and say, unwaveringly, God did that? It wasn't me, it wasn't my own capacities, it was God's power working on my behalf. David had those moments, and I'm going to be honest with you. I'd be hesitant to fight Goliath. I'd be real hesitant to tangle with a bear and a lion. I kind of want no part of that. Similarly, David was also careful to resist the input of others that was contrary to his past experiences and victories. Verse 37, a few words in, Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. Can I give you the Pastor James unauthorized paraphrase? Good luck. Verse 38, this is interesting to me. Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. In other words, Saul isn't willing to go, but he's willing to lend the young boy the armor. And to think it'll at least give him a chance. He'll last 15 seconds versus 5. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around. Why? What does it say? Because he wasn't used to them. He's about to go into battle, and now he's wearing implements and armaments he's never worn before. And even though the king himself had given him the gear, he says, I can't go in these. I'm not used to them. This isn't how I secured victory before when I contended with the lion, the bear, and oh my. So he took them off. And now we see that David does something wisely, predicated on past accumulated experience. He took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his what kind of bag? Shepherd's bag. You see, he's beginning to arm himself with things he was already accustomed to based on the things he's already gone through. And with a sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. David was quick to rely upon God's past victories and the things he had learned in the midst of them. I wonder how often David as a young boy was practicing with that sling. And by the way, when you go home, go to YouTube, type in like shepherds and slings. They are lethal with them at great distance. We're not talking about the little stick with the little rubber band and bink. We're talking about a sling, something that he had honed over years. Sometimes out of boredom, because I can't imagine that watching a bunch of sheep is really that exciting. So he did some target practice. I missed the Coke can that time. Let's try. Do they have Coke cans back then? I don't know. Or if there are wolves and lions, tigers and bears, oh my. This was, he had practiced. Everything that he had been through, spiritually and naturally, had led him to this point. I ask the question, could it be that everything that you've endured thus far in the Lord has been preparatory for what you're facing now? How many of you have keys? Take one out. Just take it out, look at it, study it. And don't try to give me a key fob. I'm talking about an old school, it's got a jingle when you walk. Sean Barry, you must be really important because that key ring, wow. You need to hear me. Every single angle, every single groove, every single pitch of height and difference, all strategically placed by someone that knew what the key was intended to do. And whether it be through file or tools, I don't know how keys are made, they fashion them deliberately and specifically to suit and unlock something that needs to be unlocked. I think that life is much that way. The Lord knows what your tomorrow holds while you're still worrying about lunch today. And he knows next year. And he knows when you're 90, Lord willing you make it that far, the things that you are going to be facing. And I would say, what if the things he is doing in you now are shaping you for what you are going to face then? And what if the things that you're facing now, all that you need to overcome it, he's already done it in and through you based upon what you've already faced? Don't try to fake it and put on some fake armor that you're not used to. Look to the Lord on what he's already done. Now again, for each of us, the application of that's going to be different because we're all different and we don't all face the same Goliaths. But the challenges that you've already overcome in the Lord have prepared you for this moment or what is to come. I move quickly to the final 1 or 2 points, and they are interrelated. David was a man of what I will say is humble faith. Humility and faith in operation. When David refers to himself before the king, how does he refer to himself in relation to David? Your servant. At no point is he vying for the king's job. At no point is he trying to assert himself as a superior. We see a demonstrable humility here. Your servant will go and fight him. Verse 36, again, summarizing why he has the confidence in this moment to go forth. Your servant, there it is, verse 36, has killed both the lion and the bear. This Philistine will be like one of them. Why? Because he has defied the armies of the living God. Now look at the faith in verse 37. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and of the bear will rescue me from the hand of the Philistine. I love the faith in that. We just came through a series, See No Evil, Hear No Evil, Speak No Evil. You want to know what David is doing? He's speaking life in the midst of death. Based upon past experience, what God has done before, he's able to do again, and I am believing that he is going to rescue me from, deliver me from, preserve me through this ordeal. He could have been like every other man on that battlefield. He could have ran, he could have fled, he could have spoken, I have no chance. He could have agreed with the testimony of Saul and Eliab. You've already forgotten Eliab's name. He could have said, you know what, Eliab has a really fair point. Who do I think I am? I must be conceited and proud. And I must be here for ill motivations. And even the king said, I don't have a chance. He doesn't do any of that. The Lord has done it before, he'll do it again. And I end with this, that David was a man who was consumed, not with his own glory, but with the glory of the Lord. Do you want to know the people that God elevates? It's those who prefer and prioritize him to their own issues, needs, desires, and more. Look what it says in verse 46. Now, there's a bit of banter. Read it in your own time. Goliath promises to kill Goliath, and frankly, it was a fair bet. If I was putting down money, I probably would have bet on Goliath that day. Hey, good luck, David. Ooh, that was ugly. And Goliath detests this young, how dare you? It's an affront to him. Israel, this is really the best you got? David, I'm going to kill you, son. And I'm going to feed your body, your carcass to the birds. But David doesn't agree with that. Verse 46, no, this day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. Now, I'm going to keep this as G-rated as I can, but this is what it says, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. It's war. There's a time for all things. And this is one of those moments where the cutting off of a head is what was warranted in the situation. That is not permission to go forth and try it. This very day, look at the confidence here. Supernaturally inspired. I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals. Now look at this. This speaks to his motivation. And the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. He wasn't seeking to elevate himself. You know what? After this battle, everyone's going to know me. I'll finally be able to say, even to Eliab, do you know who I am? He's not concerned with his name. But he's concerned that the whole world know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it's not by sword and spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into my hands. There's no pride there. There's no self-centered desire for renown, though renown would come. His focus is on the glory of the Lord. And God honored that. He looked down and saw this young boy who identified a problem, but who was also unwilling to live with the thing. Someone who was willing to say no to every contrary voice, but one who was willing to practice a little bit of faith and a little bit of humility. And somebody who was genuinely motivated, not by self or even self-preservation, but that the world might know that there is a God. Gang, it's 2026. This happened over 3,000 years ago. We are still talking about it. It is evidence that there is truly a God, and that those who are willing to follow in David's footsteps, which is you and which is me, Lord willing, we can do similar things. Now, I close with this. There is a very good chance you are not going to be fighting a literal Goliath. If a 9'9" guy comes out of nowhere with a 15-pound javelin spear, the whole armaments, let me know. I'll come watch. But it doesn't diminish the fact that in the course of your life, you're going to be facing your own Goliaths. You are going to have challenges. Frankly, some of you are already in the midst of them. Can I invite you, can I call you, can I challenge you to consider what David did and do likewise? because I have to live with the conviction that since all Scripture is God-breathed and inspired and is therefore profitable, there's something profitable about this teaching. And that the principles that have been shared today and that you glean today, as you seek the Lord and consider his ways, maybe you can go forth and you can do great things and you secure genuine victory and you can be an overcomer rather than one who is always conquered. And you can live in the liberty that the Lord has designed for you.